Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Sophia. Super excited to spend time with you and your audience today.
Yeah, so I think if people don't know, you are I would say, the executive producer and kind of the mastermind behind Sound of Freedom, which came out in 2023, right? It's been a couple of years now. Is that right?
Yeah. We actually it's almost a little over 2 years now. We're the
Okay.
number one independent film in the world, and
Wow.
super grateful for that. We um, Hundreds of millions of children are safer now because of the awareness that the movie created. And
Mhm.
I'm the primary investor, executive producer. I led or played a key part in over 70 undercover child rescue missions in 15 countries over a period of 10 years. And then
Wow.
we took the story of one of the largest missions ever in Colombia. Over 120 children were rescued that day, and we took that story and put it together into a film that made a huge impact in the world.
How similar was the story portrayed in Sound of Freedom to the story that actually took place in Colombia?
What I will say is that we took about 8 different rescue missions and put them all together into one storyline.
Nice.
And the real truth that was missing in the movie was the fact that there was well over 20 plus operators that were highlighted in the movie with only one or two of the actors, if that makes sense. So the
Oh,
real
okay.
heroes are still hidden heroes. A lot of those heroes are guys who are still on the ground. So, for example, the little boy coming across the border, that was another agent that was there with him, but that agent is still in the field. So we have to give that to Jim Caviezel. Same thing with, the little girl was actually rescued there. That little girl that was the picture that was shown to me by my driver in the car. My role on that mission, I played the part of the wealthy real estate mogul who funded that mission and chose to go undercover to help on that mission. And so Eduardo Verástegui, who is the producer of Sound of Freedom, he played Pablo Delgado. He played me
Right.
in that film, and that little girl was rescued there on the island. The jungle dressed up as doctors. That was an entirely different team. That was a whole different country,
Okay.
looking for a little boy, not a little girl. But all those things happen. We just put them all together into one storyline for the audience to understand really what's going on in the world.
Yeah, I was doing some research before we met here and before we started the interview, and it sounds like you could have done a whole series of these movies. Like, you have so many stories over the years, and so that makes sense that it's a composite, and you're kind of putting everything together. I'm curious now, because it's been a couple years in sort of the aftermath of everything. What are some things that you learned, and was there anything that surprised you about the movie and even the kind of the wakes of it a couple of years post release?
Well, yeah, the thing that surprised, well, it wasn't a total surprise because I know how deep the rabbit hole goes with things like child abuse and sex trafficking and pornography, et cetera. But the level of pushback we got from big media, from big Hollywood, that level of pushback was beyond anything that I could have imagined. The film was finished 5 years before it came out to the public, and we fought tooth and nail with the establishment to be able to get it out to you as the general public, to be able to make the impact that it did. And I recognize it's because there are so many people who want to keep this subject hidden. They don't want us to have these open conversations about really what's going on
Yeah.
in some of these circles. And so um, once we finally broke free from some of the handcuffs that were put on us by Hollywood and big media, we had to take the movie to the people by the people. So we took kind of a grassroots movement with social media and Angel Studios, who was able to take it with a bunch of really good people that were spreading the message to others, and that's how we made the impact.
So, okay, so the movie came out 2023, but did you say it was done 2018, 5 years
Yeah.
before?
Yep.
You're kidding.
Yeah.
Was the pushback from mainstream media because they were already trying to keep this thing sort of at bay anyway, and then you found another way to get it out, and so they said, fine, if you're going to go public with it and be big about it, then we're just going to make your life hell on the other side.
Well, here's a story that'll help you really understand what's going on. So Angel Studios, the company that finally helped us take it out to the world, their predecessor company got sued by Big Hollywood. The reason they got sued is that they had created a piece of software and hardware. It looked like a little DVD player, but it had some controls on it that allowed you and I, as good parents, or even just wanting to filter the stuff that was coming into ourself, allowed us to filter the films that were coming in. So we could take it. There was one setting for pornography. There was for nudity. There was one for vulgarity. There was one for violence, etc. And you could turn them from 10 all the way down to one. At one, you see zero nudity and zero vulgarity and et cetera, et cetera. So a parent could take a DVD, put it in there, and tune it down for themselves or others, still enjoy the movie without the triggers that were going on with the nudity or the vulgarity,
Wow.
whatever else. You could tune it down. But
Brilliant.
Hollywood sued them for creating a piece of hardware and software allowing you and I to filter what was coming in. Why?
Mm,
Because they have an agenda. Guys, their agenda is we sit back and we're like, yeah, I love Will Smith movies. Really? Do you know what Will Smith does on his spare time? Do you know what his wife walked in on him doing? Do you really? And that's what we're supporting. And there are
mm,
underlying messages in so many of the movies that are slowly moving humanity to this state of depravity when it
yeah.
comes to not respecting the divine feminine, when it comes to not respecting the Lord's name, etc. These are all things that they're just slowly pushing us, and we need to wake up and recognize really what's going on.
Man, I'm so glad you said that because I this is actually why I wanted you on the podcast because I think often we become I agree with what you said. I think we become so desensitized and it's happened, kind of just gradually over time. Like the agenda's been pushed and things that 20 years ago would have been considered obscene and disgusting are kind of just the norm today and that boundary continues to get pushed, right? But I think where you and I have a lot of overlap in our missions is sex trafficking and pornography are incredibly linked. And we were saying this, before we hit record. It's almost laughable that people would be anti-trafficking and would say, "Yes, Sound of Freedom, what an incredible movie," but then continue to watch pornography and not think of it as that big of a deal, not realizing those two are linked. Can you connect those dots a little bit for my audience, Paul, and help people understand what's really at play here between these two fields that people might think are separate?
Absolutely. So I recognized after my very first undercover child rescue mission, I thought that I was going to see guys with tattoos on their necks and earrings in their noses, and that kind of a thug type energy. And the first trafficker I met was a businessman, well dressed, polo shirt, well shaven, clean cut, and well spoken. The next one I met was a beautiful woman that was running a fake modeling agency, drawing these
Mm,
kids in. And at first I thought, oh, these aren't traffickers. And as we sat down and started talking, absolutely, in every way, they were selling kids. And I realized over 10 years of doing undercover child rescue missions, 70 plus missions, 15 countries, I recognized that the common thread wasn't earrings in their noses and tattoos on their necks. The common thread was three or four different things. It was arrogance, it was greed, it was lust, and for many of them, it was an addiction, especially the perpetrators. It started out with a hardcore addiction, almost 100% of them, a
mm,
hardcore addiction to pornography. And that addiction accelerated where it wasn't just one thing, it needed to be deeper and deeper. And pretty soon they were just like a hardcore drug. You need something harder to have that same fix. And for some of them, hardcore fix was more bondage stuff, more rape videos, and for some of them it was a little bit younger. Pretty soon they were fantasizing about something they wouldn't have even thought was attractive 5 years ago,
mm,
and then they're acting out on this horrific fantasy, which is creating a tsunami of demand. Literally, human trafficking is the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world, and good
mm,
people don't know that it's happening. Now, a lot of guys will say, "Well, mine's not progressing." Yeah, it is. Look back at where it started, guys. It probably was a swimsuit issue of Sports Illustrated. Then it progressed to the Victoria's Secret lingerie stuff, and then it progressed to just booby pictures, and then it progressed to full nudes, and then it progressed to videos, and then it continues to progress because it's insatiable, because
Yeah.
it is not true love. And the very second that you look at another human being as anything less than the divine that is within them, you look at a woman any less than the divine feminine, and you start turning her into an object, you go down that dark road. The
Hmm.
same thing when you look at and I look at another man with, oh, he's below me because he earns this, or he's done only this in his life. Anytime that you're looking at another person as an object to create income for you, or an object to fulfill a desire, an object in any way less than the divinity within them, then you share in that energy that the traffickers and perpetrators were in every single time I did a mission. It's
Hmm.
so important that we recognize that, and recognize how prevalent that is in any time that we're looking at pornography. And
Wow.
so, in addition to that, the number of women who are engaged in that world, many times they're not operating completely under their own, um, by their own choices. In fact, we had a woman. She was at 12 years old. She was taken from her home in Mexico. She was taken to New York. She was sold 20 or 30 times a day for sex from the time she was 12 until she was 17. She escaped. The traffickers got her, beat her up, brought her back. By the time she was 18, 19, she escaped again, this time with the help of one of our partner organizations, who had a phone number that was being advertised on television. If you're in trouble, call this. Easy to remember. She memorized it, called. We were able to get her out. She
Wow.
was at our home over Christmas, and I asked her, because she had been in the pornography world, she had been in the prostitution world, forced prostitution, for a long time. And I asked her, I said, tell me this: the women who you see on, back then, Backpage was still a big thing, the online apps where you can find prostitutes. I said, the women that are on there, what percentage, the ones who are saying that they're independent, that they're really on their own, they're not being trafficked, what percentage of them really are independent, and which percentage are trafficked? And I thought it would be maybe 50-50. I thought maybe half of them would be trafficked and half of them were really earning money for their kids' school or whatever. And she said, oh no. She said, I guarantee, because I've been in this space for 10 years, she said, I guarantee it's 90 to 95% of them
Jeez.
are being trafficked. She said,
Wow.
if you're hooking up with a prostitute you found online, if you're masturbating to pornography, if any of these, she says, you are contributing to trafficking. And it's
Wow.
important for you to understand those numbers.
Oh man, yeah. It puts it in perspective. I think this is the stuff people don't realize. Certainly, it's the stuff that people don't talk about. So, in case people can't tell, this is not something that you just do for fun. You don't get into the stuff on the side. You're fully committed. And one thing I wanted to ask you, Paul, is where did all this passion come from? Because one thing that people will learn about you if they do some research and watch the stories and everything is you're not, I mean, you're successful in business. You're really using the resources God's given you to make a difference in the world in a really incredible way. But you're not just writing checks and funding things and then kind of dusting your hands off and letting people carry out the mission. You're on the ground. You're front and center. You're getting your hands dirty. So to me, everything screams passion. There's something underneath all this. Why are you so interested in all this in the first place?
There's three or four things. First of all, I saw the damaging effect of these things in my own life when I was growing up. I was on the peer leadership team in high school, and I talk about this in the Sound of Freedom book. I go in depth as to what to look for when you're identifying children who are in these kind of situations. It's, a lot of parents will leave Sound of Freedom, and they'll say, I want to do something, I want to help, I want to go help rescue kids. Well, the worst thing you can do is go undercover in Mexico and try to find kidnapped kids. You're going to get shot. You're
Yeah.
probably going to get arrested, right? The best thing you can do is go home and hug your children. And people are like, well, how does that help? Well, the majority of children who are being sold and manipulated for sex sleep in their own beds at night. And their parents don't even know that it's happening, including children that are brought into child pornography. These kids are manipulated through fear. You need a
Mm.
relationship with your kids where they can come to you and say, "Hey, Dad, I don't like it when you tell me to hug Uncle Harry because he touches me weird and he says we should have special secrets that aren't for you." Or I don't like this babysitter because she's showing us pornography and says that we should trust her more than you. Or I went to this friend's house and her brother's taking pictures of us when we were changing, and now he says he's gonna share it all over the internet unless we do other things. These are all manipulating behaviors of perpetrators that are
Mm.
very, very common. And so I saw this in my own childhood with some neighbors that had gone through some things. Even when I went into some leadership positions in high school, I realized that the children who we were doing peer counseling with that had a lot of challenges emotionally was because of sexual abuse in the home. And
Mm.
so moving beyond that, later in life had some very close relatives that were abused by their grandfather and by their own father. And
Wow.
this just, when I found that out, I wanted to. I was talking to a friend of mine. His name was Petter. Petter was a Green Beret. He had 300 missions in the field that he led, very effective. And I said, if you found this out about this family member, what would you do? He said, I'd take that perpetrator, I'd kill him. I'd kill him. He says, I just absolutely, if I found, he says, I couldn't handle dealing
Mm.
with the fact that that happened to a family member like that. And then he said, we were just jumping on a plane and we got off the plane and about 2 hours later, and he said, Paul, my first reaction to what you said was, take a knife to his throat. He says, but the truth is, he said, that guy was probably abused as a child himself. That guy probably is holding on to some dark energy. Now, guys, don't get me wrong when I'm saying this. I am not a sympathizer of anybody who hurts another human being like this. I have literally put my life in danger hundreds of times to ensure that innocence is preserved. However, I recognize that the majority of traffickers were trafficked themselves as children. The majority
Mm.
of perpetrators had some trauma that they needed to release, and that added on to a lot of the challenges with their addictions, etc. Moving forward, I have a special set of skills that makes me somewhat safe in a dangerous place, and was recruited many years ago to help in some undercover missions.
Mm.
And my very first mission changed my entire life.
Mm.
This mission, I remember I was sitting there negotiating with these traffickers, and one of them brought out this little girl. She was 11. She was being sold as what they called a 0 kilometer mile model. She was a virgin, and she was standing. I'm sitting down. She's standing up. Was no taller than I was sitting down. So we were almost eye level. This little child standing there, and she had tear stains in her makeup face. She was so scared. And I looked into her eyes. All I could see was that fear.
Mm.
And I made a commitment at that moment to myself, to God, to that child. I made a commitment that I would dedicate my life to eradicating that evil from the face of the earth. And over time, I realized that doing all these undercover missions wasn't going to fix it. We had to create a movement. We had to create awareness, and we couldn't take millions of people to see what I had seen because
Mm.
that's in dangerous places. But we could help millions of people feel what we had felt,
Yeah.
and that's what we did with the movie, and that's what we're doing with the podcasts, etc. So that was a long answer to your question, but
That was,
that is what changed my life. Just a series of things, and recognizing that this indeed hits home. It's going
yeah.
to hit every one of us in our own homes if we don't do something about it. We have to wake up humanity. We have to heal humanity to fix this problem.
Hmm. What has surprised you, good or bad, as you've kind of began this mission? You sound very visionary. Like you had the experiences, you knew what could be done, and you set course. And obviously, I know you're very successful in business, and I feel like business is very similar. My deep clean, my coaching practice is, I always think of that the same way. Like, I said yes to God to help guys quit porn. I had my own addiction for 15 years. It ruined my life. I vowed if I could figure it out, I'd help other guys figure it out too. And then I feel like every year I say, man, I didn't realize how much it would cost me. I didn't realize how much, I've gone further down this track than I ever thought I would. I've had to push myself more than I thought. It's taken more sacrifice, more pain, more, all of that. I guess I'm just curious for you, because you had done business so much. I'm sure you knew when you commit to something, there's always things don't go the way you plan them, and there's sacrifices you have to make and curveballs that come your way. And you talked a little bit about that already, just the pushback from Hollywood and mainstream media and all that. But I'm just curious, maybe more on the rescue side of things. What has taken you aback? What have you had to do that you didn't really think you signed up for? I'm curious about some of those parts of the mission so far.
Absolutely. Well, I will say this: going into the pit of hell like that takes a toll on every part, your soul, your energy. We were we were blowing through undercover operators. We had Green Berets, Navy SEALs, guys who had already spent a lot of time in battle, who had seen what they believed was the darkest part of humanity. And one undercover mission with me, seeing a menu with children's faces on it and prices, um, sent them over the edge. They're like,
Mm,
my PTSD is already, I can't deal with this.
wow.
And it happened over and over again. And, when you see what we had seen, it gets really hard. I remember me and Andy had done 23 missions with me. We were in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Haiti, Port-au-Prince is the most dangerous place on the planet. On the planet. Look up most dangerous cities. I did 12 undercover child rescue missions there. There's no city on earth that is more dangerous. And we were trying to take down the rings that were just infesting the Caribbean, and a lot of the head pins, the kingpins, were there. And Andy and I worked our way up to what we call a level 3 trafficker. These are the ones who are physically holding the children in captivity. And it was about 2 a.m. The henchman had brought us to this lady. Her name was Cho, big heavy lady, and she'd been trafficking children for almost 20 years.
Oh,
There was this door, a red door. It was painted red. It was a steel door, about 4 feet wide, about 7.5, 8 feet tall. Sticks a key in this steel door, creaks open. Talk about this in Sound of Freedom book 2, also in detail. And I see this kind of dirt hallway and multiple cell doors down the left hand side. She sticks a key in one of these cell doors. I mean, it is like maybe 2 feet wide, this little door, and less than that, 18 inches. And she opens it. There was no windows, nothing outside of this steel door. Opens it, and there's a room, and it was about 5 feet wide and 6 feet deep. Dirt floor, metal plank that was held to the wall with a chain, so it could fold up and get out of the way. Um, a little dirty blanket with holes in it sitting on that plank. And to the left was a little girl. Now, she had been taken at 7 years old. Her parents were killed in the earthquake. Um, she had been sold for sex 20 or 30 times a day for 7 years. She was now 14. She looked up with this blank look in her eyes, like happens every day. That little girl didn't say one word for 2 weeks after we rescued her. Her very first words she said were, "I didn't think anybody would come." Now, that's the kind of thing that makes you give up on humanity. What made me so mad is that for 7 years, every man who walked through that door
yeah.
was so broken that he was there to rape her. In 7 years, Andy and I were the first ones who walked through that door that didn't have that intention.
Hmm.
Now she's back with a healthy family. She's learning to dance. She's back in school.
Hmm.
Every one of these children have that a story, and even for Andy, Jimmy, and I, we are blowing through all these operators. Andy had done 23 missions. Jimmy had done 13, 14 missions, and all of us, our lives were falling apart as well, and we had to take some pretty serious action to fix the things that were broken in our lives. And that's a whole long story in and of itself, revolving around healing addictions, healing from emotional pain. My first company that I built and sold in my early 20s was a company that helped people with anxiety, depression, PTSD, addictions, childhood trauma. We had 50,000 people a month calling in off of our infomercial to get help with those problems. And we had a cognitive restructuring, cognitive behavioral therapy program on workbooks and audio programs that people were purchasing. I sold that company at 29 years old. You talk about, history and success. I sold it at 29 years old for a lot of money, many, many millions of dollars. But my passion has always been in mental health. And fast forward, after I got out of the real estate world, I got back into to mental health and healing in a very, very powerful way. And it's because of the fact that me and Andy and Jimmy were so broken with a lot of our other operators that we needed to identify ways for us to heal.
All right, bro, quick pause. This is important. This February marks 10 years since my last relapse, and at the same time, the Man Within just crossed 1 million downloads. And I didn't want to let this pass without doing something super meaningful. So here's the deal. From February 1st to 12th, we are doing a massive giveaway on this podcast. I'm giving away one spot in Deep Clean Platinum, which is my most premium coaching experience. One-on-one coaching with me, special inner child sessions with Sean, direct access, plus everything inside Deep Clean Signature, which is our flagship program. We're also giving away 3 spots in the flagship program, Deep Clean Signature. Now, this is not a random contest, okay? You apply, you tell us why you want it, and then we announce the winners live on the Man Within Podcast YouTube channel on February 13th. So if you've been serious about freedom, but timing, money, or confidence has held you back, this is your moment. Go to deepcleancoaching.com/giveaway, apply before February 12th, and make sure you show up live on the 13th. All right, that's everything. Let's get back to the episode. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, because I think it's a real part of this. And as you were sharing more stories, I was going to ask you, I was just thinking, how do you see what you see, go through what you go through, and not be, affected by it, or not have it play into your own stuff? To whatever degree you're comfortable, could you unpack that journey a bit? And the reason I'm asking, Paul, just for some context, is when guys are working with us and they're healing through their addictions to pornography and their sexual misbehavior and infidelity and whatever else, this is the journey, right? This is the work we do. And I would love to hear just a little bit about what that looked like for you.
I would love to. Now I'm gonna go down some roads that some people are gonna say, "Oh, wait a minute," but give me the time, because I'm one of the most experienced in the world in doing this the right way, the top 0.01%, and I'll explain in a second. So let me first of all explain with what we did with our company in my early 20s in cognitive behavioral therapy and how we break free of things. Our brain, when we're little kids, is in 0 to 8, 9, 10 years old, is in a state of neuroplasticity. We're very, very impressionable. We can learn 3 or 4 languages at the same time that we're learning to ride our bike and a bunch of other things. Now, if you imagine your subconscious mind is a brick of gold, and this brick of gold in neuroplasticity, it's in flow state. It's liquid. And if something happens when we're 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, if something happens like, your uncle abuses you, or even something simple like your dad says, "Oh, you look ugly in blue," whatever it is, that will get impaled into that gold bar, embedded deep in there. And then when it hardens, when later in life you're not as impressionable, which is good. Now you're in school and you don't have some kid says, oh, you're ugly, it's not going to get stuck as easily. It's kind of hard in there. The problem is that our subconscious mind controls 95% of our life. After that state of neuroplasticity, it takes at least 21, 30 plus days of doing the same thing to be able to create a new habit, because it's like chiseling on the end of that gold bar to try to form it into what you want. Well, there are certain things that you can do to get back into a state of neuroplasticity in breath work, different types of meditation. There are different tools that we were using back with our cognitive restructuring program that help people get to a state where you could be a little bit more malleable. Well, fast forward about 9 years ago, I had been doing a bunch of undercover work, but I got a call from Andy and Jimmy. This is before the movie even came out or anything. They called me on the phone together and they said, Paul, do you trust us? And I said, yeah, I literally trust you with my life. Undercover, I'm in charge of talking. They're in charge of making sure I don't die. They said, you need to come to this healing retreat. I said, what, healing retreat? I said, I don't need to heal. I'm Paul effing Hutchinson, right? Now, realize this. I had built what was then a multi-billion-dollar company. I had massive house. I had 2 helicopters, a plane. I had 50 plus vehicles. I had a lifestyle of lifestyles, like 10 bathrooms in my house, 3 kitchens, 7 fireplaces, a basketball court in my basement, a full DJ booth with stripper poles on my stage. Okay, this was off the charts type stuff. And I said, I don't need to heal. I'm Paul F. and Hutchinson. They go, no, yeah, you're on your second marriage, headed for a divorce. Your kids don't talk to you. You've got sexual addictions out the yin yang. You think that happiness is going to come from one more party, one more girl, one more car. You need to heal. And we've been working on some stuff, and I'm like, okay. So they introduced me to this doctor. She had traveled the world and identifying different types of holistic healing tools that could help guys who were, and I was beyond hope. I would go to a therapist, and I would purposely find a therapist that was good looking, see if I could, take her out type of thing. This is how bad my addictions were, right? And this doctor had what her specialty was in the proper use, and this is so important, guys. And it's important you understand this, because the laws will change in the next 2 years, and it's important for good people to understand what's proper use and what is not. She was specializing in the proper use of psychedelics when it came to overcoming addictions, PTSD, childhood trauma, etc. And things like psilocybin and mushrooms. Now, at first I thought, wait a minute, those things are Schedule 1 drugs. They're ranked right up there with cocaine when it comes to how long you'll go to jail if you have them in your pocket, right? This is something. So I thought they were as dangerous as cocaine. The truth is, psilocybin is safer than table sugar. There has never been a case of addiction, not one ever. There's never been a case of overdose, not one ever. And when used properly, they are the most effective tools I have ever seen in helping people break free of some of these traumas. And here's why. Here it is in a nutshell. It creates a temporary state of hyperneuroplasticity, like when you were 4, 5, 8 years old, okay? Turning that gold bar back into a flow state. This is why it's incredibly dangerous to go to a rave party and go get high with your friends on mushrooms. Why?
Right.
Because you turn that gold bar into a flow state, and you've got an orgy going on over here, and you've got rap music going over here, you've got somebody yelling at their wife over here. In that flow state, super hyper situation where you're very, very impressionable, it's damaging. However, if you come in with a clear intention, you have a facilitator who knows how to go into that 7-year-old self and help you reframe that memory with your uncle that's creating the addictions today. All of those things, you can create 10 and 20 years worth of therapy in 24 to 48 hours. And for me, that's what changed everything. Now, it was the most beautiful, horrific experience of my life.
Sure.
Horrific because I felt the facilitator gave me the hero dosing that we were doing. We're not talking about just a little micro dose. It's something you need help to go to the bathroom type thing, right? So
Mm.
I've got this. I can barely stand, but I could feel in every cell of my body. I could feel the pain that my children felt when I cheated on their mom, as if I was them.
Mm.
And it was so hard. It was so damaging. I could feel the pain that my wife felt when she walked in on me when I was looking at pornography. I could feel that pain. I could feel how undervalued she felt. It
Mm.
was as if I was her. It felt like Satan had his foot on my chest and I was 600 miles in the dirt and I could barely breathe. And I switched the playlist. The facilitator could tell I was, so she helped me switch the playlist to what I call my Jesus list. It was this beautiful redemptive music, and I could feel the hand of God just pulling me out of the dirt and all this crap just coming off of me. And
Mm.
I said to myself, Paul, have you learned your lesson yet? And I said,
Mm.
no, probably not. So I switched it back to the song that was triggering to me, that was taking me, that was meditative, deep drum stuff, boom. And because I was in this hyper state of neuroplasticity, boom, it took me back down. And now I felt the ripple effect of my actions. I could
Mm.
actually feel the money that had gone to somebody because I was involved in a pornography was affecting that woman's life to the point where she was being trafficked, she was controlled. I could feel the guy who came to my party who slept with a cheerleader and his wife left him because he was there at my now I could feel the after effect, the ripple effect of now a year later his daughter gets abused by the new boyfriend, or the son gets on drugs, all because of the fact that guy was at my party with the debauchery I had going on. And
Mm.
I just it was so heavy, but at the same time it was so liberating to know that the future is unwritten, that I could release all of that. I could just release it all
Yeah.
and come to this place of beautiful healing redemption in my life. And so now we run through liberating humanity, through the sanctuary. I became a master facilitator, and now our family runs these retreats. We've hosted and facilitated now over 85 guided meditation, breath work, plant medicine, healing retreat
Wow.
events over the last 8 years, and have a very high success rate and
Mm.
helping people, even guys with heroin and cocaine addictions, completely break free of those addictions,
Wow.
which sometimes pornography is as difficult as heroin and cocaine to overcome. And
Yeah.
so, anyway, I would encourage people to do their own research. This is not something where when they start changing the laws, which they have in Colorado and Oregon, et cetera, it's so important that people understand the proper use of these tools,
Mm.
and have a facilitator that can help in that process.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you sharing your story. I think it's, again, it's important for people to heal, to hear rather, how people are healing, what that looks like, and understand the extent of what you were living, and what you had experienced from, childhood all the way up. Um, yeah, we've had a couple people on the podcast share about their experience with psilocybin, in particular, and I think they're great stories to hear. I personally have not experienced it, so that I actually like hearing other people share about their experiences and what it's been like. And I think it's amazing. If I'm getting the timeline right, Paul, this happened while you were already kind of starting to do missions, right? But they're obviously
Absolutely.
amounting. So talk me through. I'm going backwards a bit, but just talk me through. Were you living like in that? Are you throwing the parties and all that kind of stuff while you're also going out into the field and rescuing people? Are those
Absolutely.
happening?
Yeah, because
Okay,
it was a very, for me, my parties, we weren't doing anything illegal. I was, we had guys from the Attorney General's office that I hired, that were security for the AG office, that I hired to check IDs when anybody came in, to make sure everybody there was 21 and older, because we had an open bar. So I was very, very careful with stuff like that.
sure.
My but my my world at the time, I thought they're very different. You can live this life of being this big playboy, and on the side, go do rescues. And the truth is that it worked really well because the traffickers were looking for that kind of energy. They were looking for the Jeffrey Epstein type guys who had big egos and big money. I could throw money around and boom, whatever, and then bring out the kids, and boom. Now I went home and I had the best panty dropper story on the planet. I just rescued kids last weekend, and now I've got so it was feeding into that ego. It was feeding into that negativity of my own life,
Hmm.
that was just super unhealthy.
Wow.
Yes, we were making the difference with those kids. Yes, we were
Yeah.
helping the kids, but this was maybe only a year and a half to 2 years into my 10 years of undercover. After my transformation, I continued to do undercover work, but in a very different way. I had stopped the party, stopped that energy lifestyle, and from there on, I wasn't meeting traffickers in the strip clubs. I have a book coming out soon called, well, it was going to be called "Are You Listening?" with my hand on my heart. Now it's just the first section is "Are You Listening?" But it not "Are you listening?" with my hand on my ear, but "Are you listening here?" And I recognize that there's a higher power very interested in cleaning up this mess. You can call
Hmm.
it the universe, you can call it God, call it whatever you want to. But I was able to start tuning into that, and I talk about that in the book, in the "Are You Listening?" book. Um, and literally, we were being led to where the children were being held, what we needed to do and say to keep the teams safe
Wow.
without having to go into the same negative energy that I had been taught by some of the previous Homeland Security agents and stuff when I did the missions before. And so
Hmm.
that made a huge difference in how we were doing the missions. But
Did that
and
start like just after you kind of went through this transformational work? Did someone have to teach you how to kind of like start listening to your heart and paying attention to that? We call it like that still small voice, right? Or that intuition.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what's interesting is I actually go back to my early 20s. I met a man. I talked about this in the book. I met a man by the name of Jerry Prime. Jerry had one of the highest IQs in the world. He was, uh, however, he had never graduated from elementary school. He couldn't even read or write, and yet he had invented a whole bunch of life-saving medical devices. He had invented the original software that IBM used to create voice recognition technology that we're using today on our iPhone, our Siri and Alexa and everything else. He created that. And I went to lunch with him years ago, and he said, "Paul," he said, "you could have an IQ over 200 if you wanted." And I said, "No, I'm really not that smart. Yeah, I worked hard to get my grades, and I didn't even get a scholarship. And you can't even, I don't think you can change your IQ, can you?" And he says, "Yes, you can." He said, "The difference between me and you is that I listen better than you." I said, "You listen better than me?" I touched my ear. He said, "No, I listen better than you." He touched his heart.
Mm.
He said, "Do you think that I'm the inventor of those medical devices?" I said, "Well, you have the patents, right?" He goes, "Yeah, I do." I said, "You're not the inventor?" He goes, "No." I said, "What do you mean? You stole them?" He goes, "Well, kind of." He said, "How long has the universe been around?" I said, "Millions of years." He said, "Billions upon billions of years." He said, "Those medical devices were invented billions of years ago. I was a better listener than you." He said, "When you recognize that we live in a world of universal truth, that we are energetically connected with every person on the planet, every action, every word that we do affects them and us, and it's all interconnected, and we can access divine truth leading us in any area of our life, then our whole life will change." And the truth be known, that's one of the things that made such a big difference in me building successful companies, is being able to just tune into that. Now, just because you're able to tune into that doesn't mean that you're not going to make any mistakes later in your life, and ending up with such a massively successful company at such young age ended up, leading me down a road of kind of leaving that for a bit and living that life. But then everything came back to me when I went to that healing retreat. And that's where I was able to bring that in full circle into what we were doing with the missions.
Yeah, I love that. It's so important, and we certainly see it at Deep Clean. Like when guys do the transformational work, they quit pornography, they start to, I would say, embrace kind of a new identity, live that new life. It's a huge part of like there's that proverb, right? Many are the plans of a man's heart, but it's God who directs his steps or orders his steps, and it's that kind of thing, right? You start moving again. God starts to order your steps. You start getting ideas, revelations, insights, things that you could have never pieced together, and that's why we do the work we do. Obviously we want guys to not be watching pornography, but more importantly, we want the men who, like you said, could look a 7-year old, pick a 7-year old off a menu, do unspeakable things to her. We want those men to be the guys who are channeling their energy, their drive, and everything God's put in their life to make the world a better place, right? And to make a real difference. And your story is a great example of that. Obviously, what Sound of Freedom has done and is doing is a great example of that. You mentioned at the beginning that the awareness that the movie has brought has, like you're saying, had a ripple effect, that's been seismic, right? I think a lot of people woke up. I'm curious though, because I think for me, and you also said earlier in the interview, which was really interesting, not everybody is supposed to be on mission, right? Not everybody's supposed to go to Tijuana or the Dominican Republic or Haiti or wherever and start doing these missions either. So how does somebody gauge like what they should do with the information they're hearing today, maybe their experience of Sound of Freedom, maybe somebody has watched Sound of Freedom when it came out, kind of forgot about it, felt really inspired, and then life continues and it kind of fizzled out and maybe it's getting reawakened a bit. How do you want people to respond so that they're not just saying like, wow, I'm more aware of something, because that's good and it needs to start there. But for somebody that wants to take a next step beyond just awareness, what should that look like?
Well, and we talked about this a little bit before the show. I recognized after 10 years of doing this work that we were never going to fix the problem by just pulling the children out of hell. We needed to pull the hell out of humanity. And every one of us are contributing to the positivity or negativity of the world around us. For example, there's something that I talk about this in the Sound of Freedom book as well. There's something I call tension transfer, where let's say that you're out of integrity, you haven't dealt with some of your anger issues, maybe even your pornography stuff, whatever. You go to work and you're just on edge, and let's say you have somebody who works under you, who they presented a little spreadsheet to you or something that you were asking for, and you threw off the handle. You were super unkind to them rather than giving them some constructive criticism to help move through it. And let's say that energy that you passed off to that guy, he goes home, he now yells at his wife for something trivial. Let's say his wife, when the little boy comes home from school, she yells at him for not getting his homework done already, whatever it is, and then the little boy kicks the dog. Literally, the kicking of that dog was an energy transfer that started with you,
Hmm.
right? So now let's pretend, and I'm going to put myself in this situation. Let's say that now let's pretend I go to work and I'm out of integrity. I've got this anger issue, whatever, and I yell at this guy. But what I don't know is that guy is holding on to some heavy stuff already. Let's say he was abused as a child himself, and let's say that he had made 1,000 bad decisions that continued him down a path where now he was addicted to alcohol and pornography. And let's say that his pornography addiction had escalated, like we talked about earlier in the show, had escalated to the point where now he's looking at illegal videos and illegal images. And let's say that his wife just left him because of his addiction to alcohol that he couldn't overcome. She didn't know about how dark the other stuff had gotten.
Hmm.
And now, me yelling at him at work, he goes home. And let's say that this is the weekend that he gets his 12-year-old daughter and her little cousin that's sleeping over with him. Okay. Now, a series of things that happened that was unbeknownst to me in his life, combined with the trauma, that energy transfer of me being out of integrity at work, now that energy doesn't end up kicking a dog. Now that energy ends up abusing a child.
Hmm.
Okay.
Wow.
is so important that all of us are able to take a look in the mirror and say, who I recognize once I did that healing journey, and once I saw what was going on with the trafficking networks that we were taking down, I looked in the mirror myself and I said, okay, Paul, yeah, you're doing great things. You're helping these kids, you're rescuing the kids, but if the common thread with these traffickers and the perpetrators, if the common thread is arrogance and greed and lust and unhealed sexual energies in your life, if that's the common thread, how are those things showing up in your life, Paul? And I
Mm.
had to take a serious check with the man in the mirror.
Hmm.
And that changed everything. I love the story of the man that's just sitting on a couch, and his little boy walks in. He says, Daddy, I want to play baseball. Can we play baseball together? And Daddy's like, oh, I'm reading the newspaper. I'm busy right now. The little boy goes out, and pretty soon he comes back in and goes, Daddy, it's a beautiful, beautiful day outside. Please, can we play ball together? And the man turns the newspaper page and he sees this advertisement that happens to have a map of the world on it. He tears out this map of the world, and then he tears it up into little pieces of paper and he throws it on the floor. And he says, Son, you need to learn your geography. I want you to go and find every piece of that. Go get some tape together, every single piece, every country where it needs to go, every ocean where it needs to go, get it, every state, get it all perfect. Once you do that, I'll go play ball with you. He thinks it's going to take his little boy at least an hour or so. The little boy comes back in just a few minutes and was all taped together perfectly. And the father said to the son, he goes, well, how did you do that? And the little boy turns over the map. He said there was a picture of a man on the other side. I just put the man together and the whole world came together. And that's the answer to the riddle right there. We don't have to go out there and create a movie that creates a global movement. We don't have to go out there and rescue a whole bunch of kids. We don't have to do any of those things. We need to look at the man in the mirror. That's the biggest transformation for me,
Mm.
was when I fixed what needed to be fixed with that guy.
Yeah.
Repaired my relationship with my kids, got into a point where I could have a healthy relationship with what ended up being my third wife. I would have never qualified for a relationship with a woman like her as
Mm.
the man that I was. And
Mm.
so that's where it all starts right there. That man on the couch, that man on the mirror. We fix that, the whole world begins to change.
Come on. Beautifully said. How about for you, Paul? The movie's out. Um, you're young. You still got a lot of time, a lot of years ahead of you, man. What are you dreaming about, and what can we expect from you in the years ahead?
Well, our healing retreats that we have here in South America, we're helping to change laws and policies in other countries. Once they're done, we'll be expanding these healing retreats in those countries as well. Um, I have the Sound of Freedom book is out on Amazon now. I have a new book coming out within a couple months called Your Infinite Wealth, that talks about making massive amounts of money, but doing it in line with God's principles, doing it in line with an energy of. I wrote it as almost a handbook of how to do business during the time when God returns, when we're in a world of peace. We're still working with each other. What does that look like? What does a true
Mm.
win-win-win look like? How do you create wealth in a way that serves humanity and serves the world and serves Mother Earth as well? And so that book's coming out in a couple months, and then I have my next one, which we talked about on the show, the Are You Listening one. That will be coming out in about 3 or 4 months. I'm almost done with that one.
Wow.
And beyond that, I just do podcasts and speak. I speak at conferences all around the world as well, and just inspire people to live a more in line a life that is in line with their divine self, their higher self, their divine mission on this earth.
It's amazing, man. Paul, if people want to get in touch with you and find out even about the books and all the stuff you're up to, what's the best way for them to do that?
It's all liberating humanity, right there behind me there,
Yeah.
liberating humanity. You can
Perfect.
go, all my social media is liberating humanity, liberating.humanity on Instagram and stuff, liberatinghumanity.com will get you information on the Child Liberation Foundation, our foundation that's helping the kids. The Or if people want to go directly to the foundation, they go to just childliberation.org and get some information on how to keep your kids safe and how to get involved with that mission as well.
Beautiful. Paul, thanks for your time, man. This is incredible. Appreciate you, man.
Oh, thank you. Super grateful to spend time with you and your audience.